Whether this is unreal or
এটা চালাতে হবে,
এটা অন করা।
হ্যাঁ অন করলে মানে এটা তোমার তুমি কথা বলতে পারবে।
না আমি ওই কথা আজকে আমার বলার কিছু নেই, আমরা শুনবো আজকে।
শুনবে কি শুনবে?
কি করে শুনবো?
এমনি শুনতে পারো, কি করতে বলুন না বেশি করে। ওরা তো মিউট, সবার মিউট করা, সবার মিউট করা।
আমার মিউট করে।
Good afternoon, everyone. We are about to start within a few minutes. I would request everyone to keep the cameras off and your microphones in the muted form. Kindly do that for the convenience of everyone.
ম্যাডাম আমরা বাড়ি যাবো, আমার ভালো লাগছে না, কোভিড হয়ে গেলে আমরা মরে যাবো।
হ্যালো হ্যালো, ওটা 4000 পড়েছো তো?
오늘 마음은 큰 놈아, 내가 봤네. 오늘 처럼
স্যালারিটা ঠিকঠাক সবাই যেন পায়, কি দরকার? না না সবারই দরকার।
마마 하나 살짝 그거 봐이 간다 봐이 다 이거. 그 살짝. 이런 거. 응. 이거 간다 봐이 다 이거 참 짜증나 내가. 그냥 그거 나가서. 나 그냥 갔던 걸 내면 거 나. 거의 바로 그냥 가라길래.
이것도 왜 이번에 40로 예, 안 왔다 그런 생각이 내가 하고.
말아 보는 거요?
이 마음은
이모. 있어 먹는 거지. 다른 거.
হ্যাঁ বন্ধ করে দাও।
ও
Hello, everyone. Can we start now? Dr. Shondip Mojumdar, Depkanti Dash, I would like to know, are we ready to start?
Yeah, we are ready to start. You can start now.
Okay, then I think we have already 5 minutes past 3, maybe it's most 6 minutes actually. So, good afternoon, everyone. As coordinator of IQAC, Srirampur Girls College, the Associate Professor of Philosophy and Joint Convener of this webinar, I welcome you wholeheartedly principal of our college. The Department of Philosophy, in collaboration with IQAC, has a state-level webinar. The topic is Pandemic and the Interface between Lived Life and Virtual Life. We have an eminent resource person with us, Dr. Proloyankar Bhattacharya, Associate Professor, Department of Philosophy, University of Calcutta. I cordially welcome you, sir, to this webinar. We are extremely grateful to you for your precious presence among us. But at the very onset, I would now request the principal of our college, Dr. Shoma Roy, to deliver her welcome address. Ma'am, over to you, please.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
ma'am, you are audible. Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Respected resource person, Dr. Proloyankar Bhattacharya from Department of Philosophy, Calcutta University. Respected teachers of different colleges, scholars, and my dear students. It is my privilege to welcome all of you in this webinar on pandemic and interface between lived life and virtual life. With the outbreak of COVID-19, we know that countless lives and livelihood of many persons has been lost. Many livelihood has been upset during this period. All of us are in shock in this COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, in this period, the webinar, how people will compare or how the life has been different in previous period and after outbreak of COVID-19 period, it needs some discussion. And the Department of Philosophy who arranged this discussion deserves my sincerest thanks. I extend my sincerest thanks to Professor Proloyankar Bhattacharya to be with us in this webinar. Thank you, sir. At last, I wish success of this webinar. I hope that a fruitful and enlightening discussion in this webinar. Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I extend my thanks to our principal, Dr. Shoma Roy, for such a warm-hearted welcome to all of us. Despite her busy schedule, she's stuck in college with some very important work, but then she has been kind enough to be with us. Thank you, ma'am, once more. Now, I would request the Teacher Council Secretary of Srirampur Girls College, Dr. Bimal Mondol, to say a few words about the webinar. I'm sorry. Bimalda, are you there? We are extremely sorry. Due to some unavoidable circumstances, Dr. Bimal Mondol, TCS, is absent, could not be present in this webinar. Extremely sorry, but he does wish sincerely for this webinar. Now, I will request the head of the Department of Philosophy and the convener of this webinar, Professor Chondrima Rai, to do us the honor to speak a few words. Chondrimati, over to you.
Namaskar. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, of course you are audible.
Good afternoon, everybody. I, on behalf of the Department of Philosophy, Sirampur Girls College, welcome you all to today's webinar organized by our department. The topic, pandemic and the interface between lived life and virtual life, is very relevant in the current scenario, as everybody has embraced virtual life as a daily routine in respect of multifarious activities, which earlier was more a part of the lived life. This webinar will help us to look and understand reality from the new perspective. I wish that this webinar will be a success and will be able to answer the questions in this regard. Now I request Dr. Sayanti Mukhopadhyay Talukdar, joint convener of this webinar, to conduct the webinar. Sayanti, please.
Yes, thank you, Chondrimati. That was indeed a very short and sweet speech by you. Thank you for your kind words. Now, before I proceed to the main session, I would like to say a few words on the concept. The concept of the virtual has been around for much longer than the technology, which now makes virtual a part of our lives. In various forms, such as that put forward by René Descartes, the concept of virtual has for long been permeating through the thoughts of the scholars. However, it is only in the recent times that this concept of virtual has gained momentum and taken the flight. For now, with emerging technologies and with the world being more unstable than ever, and with COVID-19 pandemic paralyzing it completely, the world of the virtual has grown rapidly. In this, the threatening pandemic, COVID-19 has brought us face to face at the junction of two lives. One is the lived life and the other being the virtual life. We are gradually getting used to the new normal, the real lived life slowly fading away, being replaced by the virtual life. The virtual life or the virtual environment, virtual world, which is the computer stimulated environment, which is populated by many users at the same time. They can personally create an avatar. They can simultaneously, independently explore the virtual world, participate in the activities, as well as communicate with each other. However, the commonly assumed distinction between the real and the virtual is the concept of the physical form and real identity, which is lacking in the virtual world, unlike the real world. Now, what is reality? Reality is the sum or aggregate of all that is real or existent within a system, as opposed to that which is imaginary. The philosophical questions about the nature of reality or existence or being are considered under the rubric of ontology, which include questions like, are only physical objects real? Or is reality is fundamentally immaterial? That is a concept of idealism. Or whether the hypothetical the theories as posited by scientific theories, some unobservable entities are there. Do they exist? Do gods exist? Whether the possible worlds exist? Whether there are numbers and abstract other objects, do they exist? There can be numerous such questions about reality as well as the confusions. And I think it is for this reason the title, the lived life, the word lived instead of the word real is quite justifiable as put by our eminent scholar in the topic of discussion today. For example, say there is an apple in front of me. I can see the apple, but I cannot touch it. The reason is that this apple is only a 3D rendered model of the apple. It looks like an apple, but it exists in the virtual environment. It is there in front of me, and actually it is projected onto the computer screen in front of me. I have an avatar that I can control on the screen. I can even pick up the apple and virtually throw it around the virtual room, but I cannot touch the apple with my own physical hands. Now, is the apple real? Of course not, it is virtual. But are virtual objects not even real? There is a significant question, and this question is of considerable importance. I repeat again, the question would be, are virtual objects even real? This is the question. The reality or the unreality of the virtual is of extreme significance, and it is fundamentally a philosophical question. The philosopher Philip Bray, in particular, has developed a sophisticated framework of thinking about the reality of virtual reality. He suggests that we use John Searle's theory of social reality to tell the difference. Searle distinguishes the two kinds, the physical kinds and the social kinds, along two dimensions, their ontology and their epistemology. He argues that the physical kinds are distinctive in nature by virtue of the fact that they are ontologically objective and epistemically objective as well. And he says that the social kinds are distinctive because they are ontologically subjective, whereas epistemically objective. Now, what is very interesting about Searle's theory is that it means that much of our social reality, in some sense, is already virtual in nature. And it is more so now under the present scenario, in the present context. The pandemic compelling researchers to use innovative technologies for fast-tracking the development to end this menace. Virtual reality offers an imperative role for fighting this pandemic through audio-visual based virtual communications. But a vital question would be, when a pandemic and a technology disengage us from the real world and the significance of the physical experience, what does this civilization fall back upon to redeem itself? I believe this COVID-19 pandemic has assaulted us with this realization faster than we even imagined. The free will gone, the freedom to experience being snatched away, and also the freedom to feel real in the real sense of the term. And much after this pandemic is long over, we may not be able to look at the physical reality and value the experience in the similar manner as our earlier generations did. We may be the last generation standing midway between the two eras, the virtual waiting to take over the real. I fear that if technology of the virtual increases to a point when all the physical sensations will be experienced fully in the virtual, there may come a time, it seems, that two worlds would come so close to being completely indistinguishable. And that is all. Now, this very important subject needs elucidation, fine understanding, reflection, and a conceivable conceptualization, both from the philosophical perspective as well as from the practical point of view, which our esteemed scholar, renowned speaker, will enlighten us with. Before I hand over the platform to him, I have a request to make to all the participants here. Kindly give him a patient hearing, keep your cameras off and your microphones in the muted form. I would also request that as you hear, you can place your questions in the chat box. You can write your questions down with your names, and our faculty will be collecting your questions and put the relevant ones in and place them before the speaker. He will, of course, do us the honor of answering them. Now, before I hand over the platform, a few words about the academic excellence and achievements of Dr. Pralayankar Bhattacharya. Professor Pralayankar Bhattacharya is an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy at University of Calcutta. His areas of interest include political philosophy, ethics, existentialism, and philosophy of mind. He has 19 publications to his credit, which include Environmental Ethics and Consumer Society and a Marxian interpretation of subjectivity. He has also co-edited 2 books titled Some Essays on Utilitarianism and Epistemic Problems, Some Reflections. Sir, the stage is yours. Kindly do us the honor, say of what we are eagerly waiting to hear you speak. Thank you, sir. Over to Dr. Pralayankar Bhattacharya.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Of course, sir, you are audible.
Thank you so much. First of all, I extend my heartfelt gratitude and thankfulness to Srirampur Girls College, to the principal of this college, to the Department of Philosophy, to the organizers, for giving me this opportunity in this webinar, and precisely this virtual platform, to share my thoughts on this issue that is the theme of this webinar, topic of this webinar. And I consider this as an opportunity for where I can share my all thoughts with all my learned colleagues present in this webinar. Now, as it has been mentioned by the coordinator, Professor Talukdar, that today my subject, my topic is pandemic and the interface between the lived life, between lived life and virtual life. We all know that these are the trying times all around the world, and our sleep is racked by the nightmares of what the future holds for mankind. Our freedom seems to be incomprehensible, and we are isolated, housebound, deeply anxious, and oscillating between our fear and hope. COVID cases are on the rise and are overburdening our medical facilities. Through modern communication, it is true that we are having an intimate experience with the threat, with the crisis of pandemic, which perhaps always not the real, exact, or the actual. And infectious outbreaks have really shaped our global psyche through the propagation of fear and erratic behavior. But this is not the whole story. There is another side of this story, and that is, I think, that it is also, as I have been saying for the last 3-4 months, that this is also the time, this is also the opportunity for us when we can prepare ourselves for deeper understanding of our love for life. As I have said time and again, that impenetrable anxiety, depression, crisis might lead us to greater sincerity. And it is the time, therefore, for the cultivation of creativity, for the cultivation of courage, for the cultivation of empathy, faith, and self-dependence. We can understand at this time that the freedom of freedom is actually based on the spirit, or based on the lack of, what we should say, the spirit of alienation, where if there is alienation, then we cannot say that we are exactly free. Now, keeping these words mind, keeping this view, we can say that during this pandemic, discovering the truth has become more important than simply preaching the truth. And therefore, it is the time when we can explore the art of living in different dimensions, in different forms. However, as I have said in this talk, I intend to focus on the interface between the lived life and the virtual life, since we are experiencing the borderline between these two. One is virtual and other is lived in the face of this pandemic all over the world. Now, my topic, or my talk, rather, I should say, is divided into 4 parts, as I will continue. In the first part, I shall try to discuss about the virtual life and the lived life. In the second part, I shall discuss whether virtual is real or unreal. In the third part, I shall discuss the recreation of virtual reality. And in the fourth part, on the concluding part, I shall discuss about the notion of lived life and whether this virtual life is an alternative to this real life or the lived life. Now, in the face of pandemic, we are engaged in reorganizing our life. And this reorganization of our life is rather a part of our reality, a part of our actual life. And in this process of reorganization of our life, our physical proximity is strictly prohibited. We know that, as I have said, we are housebound and social distancing is must. Therefore, our real world has been reduced to our room, our apartment. And which seems to be, the problem is that, or the question is that, this real world of my everyday life, which is rather, as I have said, my apartment or my room, seems to be coextensive with our virtual life or with our virtual world. So the real world seems to be coextensive with the virtual world. The real time seems to be synonymous with virtual time. We fail to make a distinction when we are in the real world or when we are in the virtual world. So, as I have said, our real world seems to be coextensive with our virtual world. This virtual world is practically it has been said by many writers and thinkers, it is our basically tele-existence. Even Habermas has also used this expression, that tele-existence, that is a virtual space. Even now, when we are in this virtual, at this time, we are also in the virtual platform called Google Meet. Our academic world, our market, our every dimension, every aspect of our life is due to or because of this virtual world or tele-existence. We are in the virtual space. Now, it is to be noted that this tele-existence or virtual life is possible because of technology, as Professor Talukdar has already mentioned, that because of technology, which has fundamentally changed the way we relate to the world, we relate to the real world, I should say. But the process had begun much before this pandemic. Therefore, the questions were raised even before this pandemic. This pandemic has only intensified this doubt, this question, this confusion. This pandemic has made us reflect on this situation, which rather indicates to the borderline between the virtual life and the real life, the virtual world and the real world, the virtual time and the real time. Now, when we are going to discuss about the virtual world and say for the time being real world, which I'm considering as the lived world or virtual life and lived life, the concept of virtual can be traced back even to the ancient Greece in the philosophy of Plato. Rather, I should say, in his book, The Republic, Book 7 of Republic. Those who have read The Republic of Plato, Book 7 in The Republic, there is the allegory of the cave, where we see, where Socrates talks to Glaucon, and where we see that there is a depiction that inside the cave, since birth, some prisoners are there, they are chained, and they are facing towards the wall. And what is outside world, they do not know. They have not seen that. And there's a flame behind them, and on the blank wall, they see the projections. They see the projections, they see the images, and they take the images, they take the projections as the real objects or as the reality. Now we can say that the same idea has been used. Everybody, most of us, I think, have seen the movie which is very much discussed, the Matrix movie, where the same idea has been taken, and there is a projection of the world which has been pulled over the eyes of the people, and who are blind in that sense because they cannot see the real world, they cannot see the reality. Therefore, this idea of this virtuality, therefore I have said, it can be traced back even to the Platonic world, even to the Book 7 of Plato's Republic. But the point to be noted that in Plato's philosophy, when we are talking about virtuality or the virtual world, in Plato's philosophy, the real world or reality was basically, we know, the world of forms, the world of ideas, the world of episteme, and the projected, the copy of this real world was the world of doxa, the world of belief, right? So therefore, Platonic version of reality to some extent is different, but as far as the allegory of the cave is concerned, we are led to believe that the concept of virtuality, the concept of virtual world can be traced back to the Plato's philosophy of which is in the Republic, Book 7. However, as it has been mentioned in the very beginning, even Professor Talukdar has already mentioned that we today in the 21st century, we understand virtual world as a virtual environment, which is basically a computer generated environment where there are many users who are actively participating in the process, who are basically communicating with each other. Therefore, virtual life is a kind of tech life. It is a digital life, and we have to keep in mind that this life is mediated through technology. So technology is very important as far as virtual world is concerned. So, on the other hand, if we contrast the real life, so in that sense, if we take virtual world, or if we take virtual world or virtual reality in this sense that it is computer generated environment, and and which is a tech life, which is, of course, a digital life and mediated by technology, then the question initially arises whether it is real. Now, I put this question before me. I shall discuss it later. Now, on the contrary, unlike the virtual life, I have taken lived life, as I have said. Now, what is lived life? Lived life, primarily, I would say the real life. And I would rather like to consider real life or lived life as actual life, not merely real. I'm considering it as the actual life. How can we define, how can we explain this lived life? I can, at this moment, ascribe 3 marks, 3 criteria, 3 characteristics of lived life. First of all, which is very important, lived life is full of sensory experiences. There is sight, smell, touch, taste, motion, temperature, pain, pleasure, and various kinds of emotions experienced exactly, actually, in sensory form. This is the 1 mark. Secondly, lived life offers an environment, or rather I should say experiences, which are open-ended, giving us the opportunity to create endlessly. There is endless opportunity to create, although this is also limited by our situation and by our physical parameters. So in lived life, the question of physical limitation, the question of physical parameters is of great importance so far as lived life is concerned. Thirdly, lived life is a value-driven life aiming for well-being. Actually, by lived life here it is meant that which is actually lived through emotion and encounterings. So initially we can take that lived life, that which is lived through, which is actually lived through emotion, encountering, reason, and all this. Now, in view of this, it is true that virtual has really virtual seems to be predominant at this moment, precisely during this pandemic, and it is getting a closure, more close, closer and closer to our reality, and very soon the time is coming perhaps that we may not be able, fully will be unable to make a fundamental distinction between virtual life and lived life. Now, basically, initially, as it is depicted, it is said by different scholars, even within philosophy, outside philosophy, and it has also been mentioned in the beginning that traditionally there are basically 2 concepts which are used in order to make a distinction between virtual life and lived life. The first notion, the first criteria is the notion of physical identity, physical body, and the second is the notion of risk. I shall come to it later because there are many thinkers who have dealt with this notion. So the first, I have said, identity of body or the physical identity. That is, in the virtual world, my mind is separated from my body. And thus, the difference between the virtual and the real is the physical form. In the virtual world, there is no physicality, there is no physical manifestations, there is no physical form. In the actual life, in the lived life, in the real life, there is physicality, there is physical forms, there is physical manifestation, or there are physical manifestations. Now, as I have said, another notion is there, the notion of risk, the concept of risk or the criteria of risk. What is that? It is being said that in the virtual world, when we are spending time in the virtual time, or we are in the virtual world, the risk is less, or perhaps sometimes there is no risk. But in the actual life, in the lived life, in the real life, the life that we are living, with all joys and sorrows, with all pains and pleasures, there is a risk. Lived life is a riskful life, risky life. Every moment there is risk, various kinds of risks. Now, the first notion, first criteria, as I have used, that in virtual life, as I have said, it has been said that there is no physicality, there is no physical form, or physicality is absent in virtual life. And physicality initially seems to make the fundamental distinction between virtual life and lived life. But it is to be pointed out that in the virtual world, our physicality is not completely absent, or it is not completely left behind. And we can experience physical manifestations. We can experience the physical forms. We can interact through our physical bodies. And bodies are not absent there. Even it is said that emotions are also felt in our body in the virtual world. So there is physicality is there, the body is very much present there, and even emotions are felt in that physical form, in those physical manifestations. So thus, if we make a distinction between virtual body, even if we try to make a distinction between virtual world and real world, or virtual life and real life, physical form and physical feelings are always there. Thus, physical form remains there, it is there, and emotions experienced in the virtual. Besides, it is also being said that the laws, the rights, the belief systems which are governing my real life, my lived life, are also governing my virtual life, my virtual world. For example, killing a person in the virtual world. I am just forming that through with the mediation of technology, or subjugating or exploiting a physical body in the virtual world is associated with the same physical reaction, with the same physical feeling, with the same physical, I should say, disgust or nausea as in the real world. We feel same in the real world. So we can never say that physicality is totally absent in the virtual world, because I am operating through keyboard or something, everything is there, physically operating. So physicality is totally absent. Physical manifestations are totally absent. We can never say as far as virtual world or virtual life is concerned. Now take the second point, that virtual in the virtual life, in the virtual world, there is no risk. But this is also not true completely, because in the virtual world, we know very well that at least two types of risks are in the virtual world. One is the financial risk and the other is the emotional risk. Both types of risk are there in the virtual world. We know that in the Facebook, in the WhatsApp, in the Twitter, in every forms of social media, everywhere. When we, all types of net banking, everywhere we know that there is financial risk, there is emotional risk, very much there. So we can never say that in the virtual world there is no risk. only risk is in the real life or in the lived life or in the actual life. So this was my first part of my topic, of my talk, that this is the virtual and the lived life. Primarily, we try to make a distinction between these two, but sometimes they get confused because virtual life is not completely free from physicality, and it is not completely, nor it is completely free from risk. So, in view of this, I come to the second part of my discussion. That is, virtual is not unreal. My second section, second part of my talk is virtual is not unreal. There was an American-Canadian writer whose name is William Gibson. In the net also he is available. Everybody can see that. William Gibson. He wrote a story in 1982. The name of the story was Burning Chrome. Now, in this story, and it goes back to 1980s. We have to keep in mind that. In that storybook, Burning Chrome, Gibson used an expression which we today use frequently and which rather expresses or depicts the virtual world. And the expression is cyberspace. That word was used by the writer, American-Canadian writer, cyberspace. And he considered this cyberspace as consensual hallucination. Now, Gibson was a fiction writer. He was a storyteller, story writer, and Gibson considered cyberspace as consensual hallucination. This is a kind of complete hallucination, nothing real about it, nothing official about it. There is no reality in the virtual world. It is out and out hallucination, and it is completely fictional world. This was the view of the fiction writer Gibson. Now, after that, recently, in the 20th century, another great philosopher of our time at this moment, who is much discussed in the field of philosophy of mind, and to some extent in the philosophy of language also, his name is David Chalmers. David Chalmers, in Dispute et Yo, 2017 November, David Chalmers wrote an article, The Virtual and the Real. And in this article, David Chalmers claims with high hope that virtual world or virtual life is not unreal. It is not hallucination. It is a genuine reality, virtual reality. Chalmers used this expression that virtual reality, it is a reality. It is neither hallucination nor it is fiction, and it is reality or a part of reality. Now, David Chalmers in that article had used three criteria, I should say. Immersion, secondly, interaction, and third, computer generation, by which he tried to show that this is real. Virtual reality is real, virtual life is real, and it is a part of our reality. Now, he says that virtual world generates perceptual experience and giving the user a sense of presence. within that perspective. Visual experiences of three-dimensional environments, with all our auditory and sensory elements, and virtual reality technology in future, perhaps, Chalmers says that there will be such glasses or lenses which would do the same thing. That is, we can use those glasses, we can use those things, lenses, with all these auditory, sensory elements, and thereby we can understand this is also real. So this is the known as immersion. Secondly, Chalmers uses an expression, as I've said, interaction. That virtual world is an interactive environment. Actions by the user actually make a significant difference to what happens in the environment. And in current virtual reality technology, this I should say, interpretation, or rather I should say, this happens actually through the use of different input devices, such as different technologies. We know that head and body touching tools, hand controllers, even a computer keyboard, all these are there. So a kind of physical interaction is there. And thirdly, it is computer generation. An environment is actually computer generated when it is grounded in a, I should say, computational process. When it is grounded in computational process, actually, and such that, or such as a computer simulation, rather we can say, which generates the inputs that are processed by different sensory organs. So therefore, through immersion, through interaction, through computer generation, Chalmers wants to say that this is a part of our reality. This is a part of our reality, and this is not hallucination. This is not any fiction. This is not unreal. This is real or part of reality. Now, after Chalmers, which has been also mentioned by, I shall not go into details into that, which has been mentioned, another thinker which came in, which was philosopher Philip Bray. I think it has been mentioned by Professor Talukdar, who actually mostly depends on or follows the theory of John Searle. And this Philip Bray, who had written an article, the name of the article of Bray is Physical and Social Reality of Virtual Worlds. This article was published in 2014. And Bray has argued very nicely, and which could be considered as a development after or on the theory of David Chalmers. That is, Philip Bray says that actually he makes two dimensions or two aspects, two levels of virtual reality. According to Bray, there are some virtual objects, some virtual events, which are not real. They are merely representations, simulations. And that reality, according to Philip Bray, is simulative reality. Now, as I've said, as Chalmers mentioned, that virtual reality is real or part of the real. Bray is of this opinion that there are some objects, there are some events in the virtual world, in the virtual life, which are not real. Which are not real. They are simply representations. They are simply simulations. And the very famous example of he gives an example of Apple. We can take any example. the example of a dress, example of an orange, example of a ball, anything. We can take the example that a dress, for example, say, or an apple, even in the 3D model, in virtual environment, can't be this apple or this dress I find in the virtual world. The apple or the orange, I cannot bite that apple. I cannot test that apple. I cannot put on, wear the dress that that is in the virtual world as the virtual object. Of course, I can make some dummy, I can projection of myself, and I can make it wear the dress, I can make it eat that apple. That is true, but I myself, I cannot bite that apple, I cannot use that dress, I cannot test that apple. So therefore, it is not real in that sense. But Bray also says that this is nor hallucination also. This is not unreal also. Simulative reality is neither real nor unreal also. It is not mere hallucination. It exists within the virtual world. It never disappears. And it has rather some sort of, I should say, metaphysical quality. And it is true that I can touch, I can bite it, I can put on, I can wear with this dress. So in that sense, it might be fictional, he even says. But this is not unreal. This is not completely hallucination in that sense. And this is same with true, for example, any example we can take. For example, from Satyajit Ray's Feluda, we can take the character Lal Mohan Babu, Jatai. Now, Lal Mohan Babu is a person who is depicted in the movie, in the story, or even in the virtual world. I create the character Lal Mohan Babu. Now, that particular character, Lal Mohan Babu, or the Jatayu, who is the author of Durdhash Dushman. Now, that Lal Mohan Babu is not hallucination according to Bray. But this is also not real. Why this is not real? Because I cannot go to Gorpar, I cannot meet Lal Mohan Babu, and Lal Mohan Babu cannot welcome me and cannot say me that apnake moshai cultivate korte hocche. He can never say this to me. In the virtual world, he can say this to me. But real Lal Mohan Babu, I cannot go to Gorpar and meet him. I cannot go to Baker Street, London and meet Sherlock Holmes. So this apple seen in the virtual world, this Lal Mohan Babu seen in the virtual world, this Sherlock Holmes seen in the virtual world, according to Bray's analysis, is neither real nor unreal. This is not real. Why this is not real? Because this is of physical nature. This Lal Mohan Babu or this apple has got a physical nature, and therefore it is supposed to behave physically in that way as a physical person or physical apple in the actual world behaves, interacts, I can interact with, but it actually does not behave in that way. It is of physical nature. It is supposed to behave physically, but it does not behave physically. So therefore, it's not real. It is not hallucination, as far as I have said. It is not hallucination because it has a physical nature and it has, I should say, a real world equivalent, a real world counterpart. So that's why it is not hallucination. There could be a Lal Mohan Babu and there is a kind of apple, but this Lal Mohan Babu is not. But this person, like this person in our society, such persons are there. Such apples are there. Such characters like Sherlock Holmes are there. But it is not real because in the Baker Street, that Sherlock Holmes doesn't live. In the Gorpar, that Lal Mohan Babu does not live. So the way it is supposed to behave physically, it is not behaving in that fashion. So it is not real. but it is nor unreal nor hallucination, because this is of physical nature, and this has, or this might have, a real world equivalent. But if we take, say, for example, a very, I should say, general class, like if I take the notion of a simply the class of person, like a middle class author, bald-headed, simple-natured, unimpressive, who makes me laugh, like Lan Mondo, who writes detective stories. Now, if I take that kind of person, no name is ascribed, only the character. If I take only the character of a detective, or if I take just the name, a sweet, red, juicy fruit, not apple I mentioned. Now, these, according to Bray, these virtual versions, they are real. They are real as their real world equivalent, because they are non-physical functional kind. Because such red, juicy, round fruits are there in the real world. Such person who writes detective stories, bald-headed, middle class, having sense of humor, unimpressive, that person there in the actual world. The person like Feluda, the person like Sherlock Holmes is there. Sorry, not like Feluda, not like Sherlock Holmes, but a person like a detective who investigates is there. Not any name I'm ascribing, I'm sorry. So the character like that, just a character of a detective, is in the actual world. So they are known by their activities. They are known by their characteristics. A detective must have all these characteristics, right? A red, juicy, round fruit must have these characteristics. So they are non-physical functional kinds, which are real according to Bray, which have real world equivalents in the sense that they are real, they are actual, they are real. Now, apart from these virtual versions, like a class, representing a class, it has also been mentioned that there are some social realities, social relationships, various, our jobs, marriage, legal obligations, social status, academic activities, library, even having this webinar, seminar, all are socially constructed. And for Bray, they can be therefore recreated in the virtual world. And in this context, John Searle's famous book is also important. We should remember that book, which was published in 1997. The name of the book is The Construction of Social Reality. It was authored by John Searle. And Searle distinguishes between physical kinds and social kinds in that book, The Construction of Social Reality. Now, it's very simple. According to Searle, let me be very brief. It has been mentioned by Professor Talukdar to some extent that physical kinds are distinctive in that they are ontologically objective as well as epistemically objective. Ontology means what actually they are. Epistemology, how we can come to know of their existence. Now, all the physical kinds like apple and all this, they are ontologically objective because an apple does not depend on human mind for its existence. The presence is there. So it doesn't depend on my human consciousness or human existence. But we can come to know of its existence through a consensus, mutual agreement, collective consciences or consciousness. So therefore, it is epistemically objective, all ascribed to that. Social kinds, unlike the physical kinds, it is of great importance here that social kinds, we are having this seminar, we are taking the online classes. Now, all these social kinds are distinctive because they are ontologically subjective, but epistemically objective. They are ontologically subjective because, for example, many examples have been taken by, even by Searle, and Bray has used those examples, like, for example, the plastic money, for example, we can say. We are dreaming of digital India, and we are approaching towards plastic money. So virtual money, in that sense, depends upon human mind for its existence, because it has no, I should say, that virtual money or plastic money has, or virtual money, rather, if we don't use the plastic money at all, just virtual money, it has no physical tangibility. It has no physical tangibility, the virtual money. So the virtual money is therefore is epistemically, and so it is ontologically subjective, but it is epistemically objective because there is a kind of collective consensus. There is intersubjective agreement behind this, and because of this intersubjective agreement, it has been accepted. So epistemically, it is objective. Now, all the factors, social kinds, like, as I have said, marriage, educational activities, property, legal rights, college, university, library, and friendship even, all these are called, therefore, by Searle as, quote unquote, institutional facts. They come into being through the collective agreement upon the constitutive rules. This collective agreement is very important so far as this epistemic objectivity is concerned. And all social kinds, all social realities have ontological subjectivity and epistemic objectivity. Now, since the social kinds or social realities have epistemic objectivity and ontological subjectivity, and they exist in the collective consciousness, therefore, it is possible for us to recreate those social kinds, those social realities in the virtual world. Because it is because of the collective imagination and collective will. It is collective imagination and collective will. Therefore, we can read books through library, even through in the virtual world. We can take our classes, and we have been taking our classes, business transactions, shopping, everything is possible through this, because all these social realities depend on, these are epistemically objective, because they depend on that collective will, that collective consciousness, that collective agreement. Now, in view of this observation made by Bray, and also based on, which is based on Searle's observation, we can say that for the last 15 years, for the last 15 to 20 years, so far as non-physical functional virtual reality is concerned, precisely social realities, as I mentioned, the areas of our lives which have been rather, I should say, which have seen a dramatic shift, transformation to the virtual area, precisely two aspects. One is information-oriented knowledge, and the other is branding. We all know that. We all know that information-driven knowledge, once T.S. Eliot says that, where is wisdom lost in knowledge? Where is knowledge lost in information? So that information-oriented knowledge, I'm not going to express any value judgment, just I'm reminding you of that Eliot's poem, that information-driven knowledge and at the same time branding, these two, I think, have seen a dramatic transformation, dramatic, I should say, shift from the real, from the actual to the virtual world. And all kinds of information we know are having through e-books, e-journals, music, accessories, medical advices, seminars, shopping, marketing, everything is possible because of this. We are participating in all these activities. And thus, which is of great importance, that from real and local, we are transforming to the virtual and the global. From real and local, we are transforming to the virtual and the global. So this is information-oriented knowledge. There is also branding. Brand concepts for many are real objects. And they are so strong that we no longer think that real object itself, but in fact associate the virtual brand as the key identity. For example, it is being said that, the digital, music players being called iPods. We understand that, and that becomes so real for us, the brand items in the virtual world. And that really influence, that drive, that motivate my actual life, my real life. This was my second part of my lecture. I come to the third part. This is the recreating reality in the virtual world, which is, of course, very important in today's situation. Precisely, we are facing this in this pandemic situation. Now, recreation of reality in virtual world is, we are experiencing this, that the reality is fabricated, reality is recreated in the virtual world, and it is not unreal in that sense. So far as I have explained, according to Searle, that social realities are concerned as far as. So recreation of reality in the virtual world is based on technology. Sorry. Recreation of reality is based on technology. And the point to be noted that this technology, which is boosting this recreation of reality in the virtual world, is basically soft technology. And this soft technology has been considered as postmodern technology, unlike the modern technology. Actually, there are three levels of technology we can say in this context. The one is the old technology. The second is the modern technology or hard technology. And the third is, which is really fascinating for us, for all of us in this, so far as virtual world is concerned, which is soft technology, which is considered as I've said, the postmodern technology. Now, old technology, as far as concerned, old technology was nature friendly. Just think of the windmill in those days. But modern technology is synonymous with hard technology. When manufacturing was replaced by manufacturing and mammoth, big, giant machines and all this, which was nicely depicted by Charlie Chaplin in his epoch-making movie, Modern Times. We have seen most of us. And that hard technology was rather alienating. And that movie we have seen in Modern Times, that one person was alienated from others, not only one was alienated from himself, from nature, as Karl Marx had once mentioned in his book, Economics and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844, that it really, this alienating factor is associated with hard technology. But unlike that hard technology, it is quite fascinating to observe, to experience that this soft technology, this postmodern technology is not alienating. This is luring. This lures us. This excites us. This rather attracts us. And we are willfully engaged in this technology. Unlike hard technology, as I've said. So human beings are willingly actually spend a lot of time with all this this kind of soft technology. We spend a lot of time with Facebook, with Twitter, with WhatsApp, with YouTube, or computer as such. and people rather remain hooked to it. So, virtual, therefore, thereby what happens, virtual seems to be more and more real than the actual. And if we closely observe this virtual world, we see that mythological time seems to be real than the historical time. Historically, Rama was there or not, we don't know. But mythological time has become so vivid, so bright, so forceful that mythological time that is spent with the character Rama has become more real than the historical time or the historical Rama. Therefore, this is very important. Now, in view of this, therefore, we can see that all these soft technology rather seem to extend my freedom, seem to extend the it is exercise of my freedom or of our freedom. Now, just lastly, let me remind you of this in this section, that is the philosophy which is rather boosting this soft technology, which gives rise to our virtual life or virtual world, is called, recently has been called, many of us know, is called dataism. The philosophy is called as dataism. Dataism, which is information flow. Information flow has been considered, it is of supreme value. The universe consists of data flows, and the value of any phenomenon or entity is determined by its contribution to data, all this data and data processing. So a dataist or one who is engaged with dataism should want to maximize data flow by connecting to more and more media. And this dataism was first mentioned by David Brooks in 2013. I just mentioned this. The Philosophy of Data. It was published in New York Times in 2013. Then in 2016, Harari wrote a book which is known as A Brief History of Tomorrow. What is going to happen in future? And there Harari says, I just quote it, humans were special and important because until now, they were the most sophisticated data processing system in the universe, but this is no longer the case. Human is not going to be the strongest. The dataism is coming. So algorithms is going to take the place of man. So it is thus becoming more real than the actual. All data put together and thereby unlocking our innovation and all kinds of progress. Our actual life seems to be controlled. Our actual life seems to be motivated, influenced by this dataism, because this philosophy called dataism seems to predict everything related to man's life, like prediction of biological, emotional, intellectual, political, every kind of prediction seems to be possible through this dataism. So there is, on the one hand, and there has been in this context a confluence of artificial intelligence and this kind of dataism, and thereby it gives rise to a sophisticated form of virtual world. Now, the logical conclusion of that or this, that eventually actually humans will give algorithms the authority to make the most important decisions in their lives. The decision-making authority is going to be, or the decision-making authority actually will be this dataism, this philosophy dataism, or this technology, this superficial, this sophisticated technology. And finally, in view of all this, what I have tried to say, where does lived life exist? How can we explain this lived life? We have seen that after all these discussions, that there are three types, three dimensions, three levels in the virtual reality. One is the simulative reality, which is actually the representation, which is neither real nor unreal. It's not real, but even this is not nor hallucination. Then there is non-physical functional reality, precisely the social realities, social kinds, which are functional very much and which are real, which are actual. And third, there is a decision-making authority in the virtual world. On the contrary, I have placed, as I've said, lived life or actual life. Now, it is really, really alarming for us, I should say, in the concluding part, in the concluding section, that the virtual life is going to dominate. The virtual world is going to dominate. The virtual time is going to be perhaps the real time. But if I am asked, is lived life an alternative to the virtual life? Is lived life an alternative to what is lived world, an alternative to the virtual world? Or what could be the fundamental difference? Because during this pandemic, we can very well understand that the distinction, the borderline between virtual life and lived life seems to be blurred, seems to be indistinct. We fail to distinguish between virtual life and real life precisely as far as the social realities are concerned. And I have said, even the decision-making authority is also ascribed to that kind of sophisticated technology. The philosophy behind this is called dataism, as I have said. All decisions are going to be taken by that sophisticated technology. But in spite of this kind of threat, this kind of threat, some points I can mention in the concluding section. As I have said, that physicality is of course there, because I cannot go and touch. I cannot go and touch. But as far as social realities are concerned, there is no question of touch. Purpose is served, and they are basically non-physical, functional, virtual reality. As in this webinar, the purpose is served. All these are participating in this webinar as they participate in the seminar. Yes, in the context of physical objects, it is very difficult because they are supposed to behave physically, but I cannot bite, I cannot taste the apple. There's a problem. So that kind of touch or smell is a problem. But it is being said that the time is coming, even these physical experiences might be experienced even in the virtual world. It is being said the time is coming. Besides, during this pandemic, just let me remind you of this, that even in the real world, physical proximity is actually simply prohibited. We cannot touch anybody. Secondly, the risk factor is rather important, I should say, in the making of this distinction between the real world and the virtual world, because yes, it's true that even in the virtual world, there is risk. There is emotional risk, there is financial risk, but there are certain risks which can be experienced completely out and out physically, and there is a kind of a risk or crisis which is closely associated with our radical finitude. For example, I use that notion many times, the anxiety of our own death. Now, anxiety of our own death, this is known as the radical finitude of our existence. But this radical finitude, or this deep anxiety of our own death, and because of that actual pain, prakito je jatona, je koshto, that kind of exact actual pain, it is actually in the real world as far as till death. It is in the lived life. That is why I have used the expression lived life, not the real life, because reality is also there in the virtual world. Virtual world is of course a part of our reality, but this anxiety, this type of anxiety, during this pandemic, we are feeling the anxiety all over the world. As I have said in the beginning, that our sleep is racked by nightmares of what is waiting for our future. We are seeing our future with both hope and fear. This hope and fear, this oscillation between hope and fear, this anxiety of our death is the anxiety, is the oscillation of a real life, in the sense it is the anxiety of a life that is actually lived. Perhaps that is not a matter of virtual life. Third, I have mentioned that technology is an important factor here so far as virtual life is concerned. But technology is not beyond question, which really boosts this development. Because we can see that technology, as I've said, it is the soft technology, the hard technology was alienating, and still that is there. We are alienated from nature, and that is realized in our lived life, that I am alienated from my nature. And we are realizing, we're experiencing this during this pandemic. Now, this soft technology, this postmodern technology which is considered, it is luring. It is not in that sense primarily seems to be alienating. It is luring. It's like I'm engaged in that, but that is also alienating. You know, all our sincere works get disturbed by all these types of social medias. Constant disturbances going on. I'm alienated from others, from the nature also because of this technology. And today I'm housebound, as I've said. My world, my lived world. In my lived world, there was nature. But in this today's lived world, there is no nature. My apartment, as I've said, today's reality is virtual reality. Today's reality is virtual life, which is beyond the natural world, which is beyond which does not coexist with our lived life, which includes nature. And to mention, I'm reminded of a famous article of Martin Heidegger, which was The Question Concerning Technology, the title of that essay, where Heidegger says that technology seems to reveal, technology seems to unconceal, technology seems to unearth. But technology gradually, it has come to a point where technology is concealing, hiding, instead of revealing. So this is also a matter of thinking, and we sincerely think of this. Fourth, autonomy is an important issue, precisely moral autonomy. Now, in the virtual life, there are also some do's and don'ts. But as far as moral autonomy is concerned, the way it was mentioned by Immanuel Kant, as far as my autonomy, self-legislation. Moral autonomy means self-legislation. Now that self-legislation is really seems to be at stake. This luring soft technology is really robbing me of that kind of self-legislation. We are continuously attracted, captivated, motivated by that kind of hyper reality, which is again recreation of reality through our virtual world. The reality, the virtual reality seems to captivate us. As IPL seems to be the original cricket instead of that test match or that original cricket. So the virtual life seems to be more attractive, more bright, more vivid than the actual life, lived life that we live in association, in close association with nature. And in the same way, my self-legislation is not possible because I will be completely decided by that soft, sophisticated technology. All my decisions will be taken by that technology. All my decisions. I do not know myself better. My machine knows me better. My doctor does not know me better. My machine knows me better. What is good for me? So that kind of sense of, I should say, humanistic pleasure, pain, joy, sorrows, sense of autonomy, they are missing in this virtual life. We can understand that. Fifth, hunger. There is a famous poem by Auden. I've been mentioning that poem in this pandemic whenever I'm delivering sometimes in lecture, in some webinars I mentioned that. The name of the poem is September 1, 1939. It was written in the time of Second World War. And there is a line by Auden, a famous English poet, that hunger allows no choice. Hunger allows no choice. And this real life, this lived life, is full of hunger. We have seen during this pandemic how the workers have shifted from one state to another state. How many workers have already died on their way to their home. This is lived life. This is real life. This is actual life. This actual, এই যে বললাম বাংলায় বললাম প্রকৃত যাতনা, প্রকৃত কষ্ট, the actual pain, the actual anxiety, the actual hunger that we experience in the real world, in our lived life. So all these factors, I think, are there in this lived life, in our life that is actually lived, in our life that we actually lead. But again, I should say that as far as our social realities are concerned, we are definitely depending on this kind of virtual world. We're living in the virtual world. And during this pandemic, as I have said in the beginning, this actual life is coextensive with virtual life. And this is the consequence of our activities of the past decades. Because of the style of our living, the way we have lived our life, that is also another important point. The way we have lived our life actually, this pandemic, this fact that today our real life seems to be coextensive with virtual life, this is also the consequence of the way we have lived our actual life, the way we have lived our lived life or actual life. So therefore, on the one hand, it is true, we cannot deny that virtual time we are spending, virtual world we are living, we are serving all our purposes, objectives are being served, all requirements are being served to this virtual world, definitely. But, and as I've said, as dataism is going to improve, and perhaps it will go to that point that I've said, that all the decisions, even in my emotional life, whom I should marry, whom I should befriend, who will be my friend, what are my requirements of life, how I can have a healthy life, what life I should live, all these decisions are going to be taken by the technology which is coming. So, on the one hand, it seems to be that our life is going to be safe and secure. But on the other hand, we are going to lose the wonder of a lived life. We are going to lose the human impulses of a lived life. So therefore, I don't know what will be the conclusion. I don't know what at the conclusion I should say, but this much I can tell, that I should expect the way I should expect that how we should use the technology, how I should look at the nature, how I should feel the wonder of my lived life, all this. And after that, after this post-pandemic, what is awaiting us, I really don't know. Nobody else knows. As I've said, how we will be able to continue a lived life, or we will be actually in the virtual world, that really we don't know. That is, seems to be incomprehensible. We are standing in just before this incomprehensibleness, but we must aspire for the life that is lived. Although on the one hand, we have to continuously use this, or will be this virtual world, but how this transition will be possible, and finally, if dataism will flourish to that extent, then I have to say that it is a kind of return to that Platonic world where Plato said that this world, which is the world of the opinion, of belief, the world of particular objects, is the copy of that real world, the world of ideas. If dataism is going to flourish to that point, then we have to say that this lived life, which I'm saying, the real life, is going to be the copy of that digital life. I don't know whether we are waiting for that, or we can, still we will continue to enjoy the wonder of a lived life. The time can say the ultimate answer. So thank you so much for this, for your patient hearing. And I'm so grateful to this college, to all the listeners who have been listening. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I sincerely thank Dr. Polanco for that University of Calcutta for extremely enlightening interface between the real life and the virtual. You have been extremely I had prepared a short note, a concept note, not knowing what exactly you would be touching upon, but I'm so glad that in a nutshell, you have elaborated each and every point. The most beautiful part was anecdotes from the real life. As the director of the book, Lal Mohan Babu, is in the book and beyond, so beautifully explained by you. I am also very surprised, rather happy, that John Searle's social reality came into your picture as well. The distinction that he made, the ontological distinction, the ontological and the epistemological distinction to understand the physical kinds as well as the social kinds. It has been so very beautifully touched by you, rather not touched, I would say explained analytically. And everything that you said about the mythology also, the real and virtual, the interface being very deeply present in this virtual world today in the 2D. You have made it happen, sir, with your fruitful presentation. And extremely on behalf of the department and on behalf of the college, I sincerely thank you once more. The topic of lived life, that's something like this, but you have the lived life and the work life, the interface, instead of the real life. I also thought I had mentioned it, concept and explained, and I feel that I have done it. And you have been extremely both at a lived life, which you have explained, bound by are sad in this pandemic condition. The challenges are eliminated by here's of even camera. So this is the prerogative of our society now. I had ended with a very sad note, but you have this is the difference. I am expecting, just like you and all my participants here, that we'll be seeing again a lived life, we'll be laughing, we'll be experiencing the joys and sorrows. So the title of today's discussion, I think, has been extremely relevant and absolutely wonderful. I hope all the audience here, the students, the teachers, the researchers, the departments, followed it. Now I will take the platform to our department faculty member, carry relations. Are you there?
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Santu madam, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Dipankar.
Okay.
And even where is Amrita?
Here I am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yes, of course, of course.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your valuable thought with us. There is some questions from our participants. Can I take? Yes, sir.
Yes.
The first question is from Shoma Chakraborty, Assistant Professor, East Calcutta Girls College.
Yes.
How can we eliminate physicality in virtual life? How can we eliminate physicality in virtual life?
Mm-hmm.
Is it at all possible?
No, actually, sorry.
Yes, sir.
No.
Clear, sir?
Yeah.
Sir,
yes, I can hear you, but some sounds are okay now.
But I have to encroach into this. There is some background noise. Please, I request all the participants to keep the camera off and the microphones completely muted, or else it will be difficult to carry this. Complete.
Can I repeat,
There is
sir?
some fans. Yes, you repeat, Dipankar.
Yes,
this question
yes.
was not heard properly.
Yes, sir,
Can
yes,
you
sir,
repeat
yes.
it? Okay, do it,
Yes,
please.
yes. How can we eliminate physicality in virtual life? Is it at all possible?
No, actually, I have not said that. My point was that in virtual life, basically those who are arguing for virtual life, they are saying that there is physicality in virtual life. There is physicality in virtual life because all types of physical manifestations, physical feelings are there in the virtual world. And without physicality, without physical interaction, the virtual world cannot continue. So therefore, there is physicality, they are saying. Now, the question of physicality, that one who raises the question, can we eliminate physicality? Then she believes that there is already physicality. So the question of elimination of physicality does not arise in that context.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So second question is, can we compare the virtual events which are not real with the objects of fairy tales? Can we compare the virtual events which are not real with the objects of fairy tales? The question is from Shoma Chakraborty.
Yeah, as I've said, this is very interesting question. Actually, I have said in my lecture, sound. Actually, I have said that we can have three dimensions, three stages in the virtual reality. One, I have said simulative reality, mere representations. Now, these simulative realities or mere representations, I have given the example, say, an apple or Lal Mohan Babu virtual world. I have given these examples. Now, simulative reality, I have said, they are neither real nor unreal. They are not real in the sense that they are supposed to behave physically in the physical world, but they don't. But they are not unreal in the sense they are not hallucinations because they are of physical nature. They have some they have some real world equivalent somehow. But as far as as far as fictional characters are concerned, for example, I can take the example of dragon, for example, a dragon who breathes fire. Now, dragon has no real world equivalent, so I cannot expect it to behave physically. So therefore, that is fictional. But even the simulative reality, this is not fictional, this is not hallucination, this is not fictional in the sense that they are supposed to behave physically and they have some real world counterpart, real world equivalent. But a dragon does not have any real world equivalent. This is out and out fictional character. And Chalmers would say that dragon has virtual digital objects in a part of reality because when it is seen in the virtual world, that becomes a part of my reality. I create that in the virtual world. So that's it. Actually, there is so much disturbances. I cannot hear.
Yeah, please.
Why is there so much disturbance? I also cannot understand.
Sir, there is a participant named Moumita De, who is Assistant Professor Philosophy, Sister Nivedita Government General Degree College for Girls. She has asked, from Sukumar Ray's writing, Hanscharu or Hijibij, who have no existence, even they are not mere hallucinations, what status can we ascribe to them? Are they real or unreal? Or we can say they have their subsistence in Mainongian world?
No, actually, as I have said, Sukumar Sen's, even I have mentioned Lal Mohan Babu, they are not, of course, they are not real. Of course, they are not real. But the sense in which a virtual apple or virtual Lal Mohan Babu is unreal is not the same sense in which Hasjaru is unreal. Hasjaru is unreal. But I have to keep in mind that Hasjaru is that kind of absurdity. Absurdity is something which is purely a projection of our imagination. Imagination projects the world of absurdity, the world of nothingness, and Hasjaru is that type of absurd object which does not have any real world equivalent. But an apple has a real world equivalent. Lal Mohan Babu, the character, has a real world equivalent, but Hasjaru does not have any real world equivalent. So that is completely absurd. And absurdity is the projection of our imagination, so that is completely unreal. We cannot say this is real or unreal. But I don't know, Chalmers might say, David Chalmers might say when Hasjaru is depicted in the virtual world, I can, create that Hasjaru in my virtual reality. That becomes a part of my reality.
Okay. Sir, one more question from our participants. What do you think would become of the concept of suffering in the virtual life?
No, concept of suffering means I have said that in virtual life, there is definitely risk. There is definitely suffering. Because as I've said, when we deal with certain social kinds in virtual world, for example, I've said that virtual money transfer, right? Virtual friendship in Facebook or in Tweet or in WhatsApp. There are risks. There are emotional risks. There are financial risks. But in actual life, in lived life, there is a risk which is associated with my own life. The risk which I have called the anxiety of my own death. The risk or crisis associated with the radical finitude of my life. So these risks are not in the virtual world because, when I'm saying that I am in the virtual world, then I might face certain risks. There are risks, but the actual suffering, actual anxiety of associated with my own death or with my freedom, say, that anxiety is a part of my lived life. That is what I say.
Yes. Okay, sir. One more question.
Sir, there is another question
Yes.
from Mumita De, madam. In virtual world free from all anxiety or pain, so why people commit suicide for a mere internet game? That sounds very
Sorry,
interesting.
I
Repeat.
I could not.
I repeat, is virtual world free from all anxieties or pains? So why people commit suicide for a mere internet game?
Mere internet game.
Game.
Oh, that is,
Internet
I have
game.
said, as I have said, the anxiety of my own death is anxiety of my basic anxiety closely associated with my basic structure as a human being. And the anxiety which is in the virtual world is actually digitally created anxiety. That is why I have said that there is risk in virtual world. There is suffering in the virtual world. But the anxiety which is closely associated with my basic structure as a human being is an anxiety of my lived life. But the anxiety which is in the virtual world, which is somehow stimulated by the technology, that anxiety is not an anxiety of mine, or that is not the anxiety closely associated with the basic structure of me as a human being.
Thank you, sir. One last question, sir. Can you take?
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. From Soma Chakraborty, can we say that our real world is suffering from existential crisis? Or in other words, our real world is in existential crisis?
Exactly. There is a point definitely that our lived life is in our lived life there is suffering which might be considered. I didn't want to delve into that existential crisis today because I never wanted to deal with existential problem today, but definitely she has correctly pointed out that this is the existential crisis, the crisis that we feel, that we closely observe in our lived life. Now, in view of all the questions, I can say only one thing last, just one point. That is, in virtual life, I have said that I fail to distinguish between virtual life and lived life. This is true. There is but we can when we are live life, we can understand that there, whether there is wonder in life or not, then we can understand live life. We can understand that there is no wonder in life, and that live life. That is
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Santidhi, please. Santidhi, am I audible?
Dipankar, yes, of course you are audible.
Yes,
I would like to know, are there no more questions? Because we can take one or two questions also. If there are some relevant questions, you may ask. You may place,
Amrita,
Professor.
Amrita, are
If
there
there
any
is.
questions?
Amrita, you can take one or two questions. Are there not? Okay then.
there's very much sound noisy sounds.
Yes, there is a noisy background. I can't. There is some problem.
Yes.
Are all background sounds off?
Yeah. Oh, everybody has wasted their mind.
কিছু একটা অসুবিধা তো হচ্ছেই, যাই হোক, ঠিক আছে. So have we come to the end of the questionnaire session? So Amrita, Dipankar?
Yes.
There is no more question.
There is no more
Okay then. Thank you, Professor Polankar Bhattacharya, for patiently answering all the questions. Thank you, Dipankar and Amrita.
Thank you,
Now
sir.
we have come to the end of this webinar on the philosophy department, a very relevant topic. Now, after such a beautiful, such extremely elaborative, exhaustive, rather I would say a lucid presentations and illuminative sessions, one is only left with a sincere, heartfelt gratitude. So now is my turn to thank each and every person who has made this webinar happen. At the very onset, the first and foremost, I have to thank the speaker, the scholar, the esteemed resource person, Dr. Polankar Bhattacharya. I remember calling him and getting a topic done. He had agreed. This webinar would not be possible had he not given his consent of being with us. Sir, আমরা অসম্ভব আন্তরিক ধন্যবাদ জানাই আপনাকে। আপনার সুনিপুণ সুন্দর বক্তব্য আমাদের সবাইকে সমৃদ্ধ করেছে। আজকে এই সন্ধ্যায় আপনাকে এটুকু বলতে পারি, থ্যাঙ্কস ফর ইউর গ্রেসিয়াস প্রেজেন্স, থ্যাঙ্কস ফর দ্য ভ্যালুয়েবল টাইম you have given us out of your busy schedule, and of course your very lively presentation that has made this webinar a success already, I'm sure. Thank you on behalf of the department. Okay, I have to do this honor to you. You deserve it. Now, I have to thank, and of course, for answering all the questions with your expertise, with your sincerity, and with your brilliance. Now, I have to thank the principal of our college, Dr. Shoma Roy. She has been with us right from the inception of this webinar. I myself, as coordinator of IQSC, had placed the proposal and she had instantly agreed to it and had sent a notice immediately. And we have come up with webinars of each and every department within this 1 month, which is indeed phenomenal. So, ma'am, thanks a lot for your suggestions and help. I have to thank now the Teacher Council Secretary, Dr. Bimal Mondol. For some urgent work, he has not been there with us today, though he had wanted to speak. So, sir, thanks to you for your kind gesture and help. I will now thank Dr. Shompa Sarkar, the webinar committee convener. She's the Associate Professor of Bengali Department. So, thank you, Shompadi, for your constant help, suggestions right from the very beginning. I do thank each and every member of the webinar committee for their constant help, for their guidance, and for their suggestions. Now, this webinar would not have happened at all without the technical assistance, which has been fulfilled so organized way in such a brilliant manner by Dr. Shandip Majumdar, Assistant Professor of Physics, and of course, Mr. Deep Kanti Dash. They have relentlessly worked to make each and every webinar a success, including today's. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to Mrs. Navamita Nath Ghosh for her beautiful poster designing. Thank you, Navamita. Now, last but not the least, my philosophy department. I am thankful to our head of the department and convener, Professor Chandrima Rai of Philosophy Department. I remember I had told Didi about this webinar, and right from the very beginning, she has entrusted me with this responsibility of carrying out this webinar, of the daunting task of conceptualization as well as the carrying out from a scratch. Thank you, Didi, for your immense faith in me. Onek onek dhonnobad Didi tomake Chandrima di. And I do thank my junior colleagues, my faculty members, Professor Dipankar Koibarto and Professor Amrita Chatterjee for conducting this questionnaire session so efficiently and smartly. Thank you both. And I do have to thank my dear, dear loving students for their enthusiasm. তোরা আজকে এখানে উপস্থিত থেকে আমাদের সবাইকে খুব আনন্দ দিয়েছিস। আশা করি প্রফেসর প্রলয়ঙ্কর ভট্টাচার্যের বক্তব্যে তোরা সবাই উপকৃত হয়েছিস। তোমরা সবাই ভালো থেকো, যা শিখলে সেটা মনে রেখো, কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকলে আবার আমরা স্যারের কাছে সেটা প্লেস করতে পারি বা আমরা আমাদের সাধ্য মতো নিশ্চয়ই তোমাদেরকে বুঝিয়ে দেব। And I do have to thank all my colleagues here, the senior, junior, my friends, for their active participation in this webinar, for their sincere wishes to make this webinar a success. And I do thank my wonderful, wonderful audience here, all the participants from different colleges and universities, my dear students, my colleagues, far and near, for your active participation. আপনাদের জানাই অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ, আন্তরিক অভিনন্দন, শুভেচ্ছা। খুব খারাপ সময়ের মধ্যে দিয়ে আমরা যাচ্ছি, সবাই সুস্থ থাকবেন, একটু সাবধানে থাকবেন, আমিও নিজেকে রাখার চেষ্টা করছি, আপনারাও থাকবেন যেন আর বিপদ না বাড়ে। আশা করি একটা ভবিষ্যৎ, আবার একটা সুন্দর দিন আমাদের জন্য অপেক্ষা করছে। আপনাদের সবাইকে জানাই আন্তরিক শুভেচ্ছা। স্টে সেফ, স্টে হ্যাপি এভরিওয়ান। নমস্কার। থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ। কেমন বললাম?